Some dreams come with unexpected baggage. Eliza Montgomery discovered this truth on a dusty frontier platform when her mail order husband first laid eyes on her and the 4 young siblings she'd brought along without warning. The towering rancher's reaction would determine not just her fate, but the future of the only family she had left in the world. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on Copper Creek's small railway platform as Eliza Montgomery stepped off the westbound train, her heart hammering against her ribs like a blacksmith's forge. Behind her, 4 pairs of anxious eyes peered out. From the passenger car, her siblings, afraid to descend until they knew what reception awaited them. 6 months of correspondence had led to this moment, but Eliza had kept one significant detail from her soon-to-be husband. She wasn't coming alone. The platform was sparse, just a handful of travelers and locals milling about, but Eliza spotted him immediately. How could she not? Jackson Reed stood head and shoulders above everyone else, a veritable giant of a man with broad shoulders that strained against his Sunday coat. His sandy hair caught the afternoon light, and a well-groomed beard couldn't hide the strong jaw. Beneath, he clutched his hat in hands that looked capable of bending horseshoes, scanning the disembarking passengers with piercing blue eyes that finally landed on her. The breath caught in Eliza's throat as their gazes locked. This was the man whose letters had been her lifeline after her parents' deaths, had left her the sole guardian of 4 young siblings with no means to support them. His proposal had seemed heaven-sent, a widower with a sprawling ranch in Montana. Territory seeking a practical partnership with a woman willing to brave frontier life. The arrangement had been straightforward: marriage, companionship, shared work, and perhaps, in time, mutual affection. But she had never mentioned William. Charlotte, Henry, and little Emma, ages 12, 10, 8, and 6. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jackson Reed's expression shifted as he watched her approach, his initial smile of recognition faltering as he realized she wasn't moving toward him with the expected eagerness. Instead, Eliza stopped halfway, her gloved hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened beneath the fabric. "Mr. Reed?" she asked, though she knew perfectly well who he was. His descriptions of himself had been accurate, if modest. He had called himself substantial in size when towering would have been more fitting. "Miss Montgomery." His voice was deep as a well, but gentle in a way that surprised her. "I'd recognize you anywhere from your daguerreotype." He stepped forward, hat still clutched in those massive hands. "Though I must say, the image didn't do justice too." He stopped mid-sentence, his gaze shifting beyond her to the train car, where William had finally gathered enough courage to descend, helping his younger sisters down the steep steps one by one. The boy, lanky and serious-faced, stood protectively beside the girls, his mother's cameo pinned carefully to his vest, the last gift she'd given him before the consumption took her. Eliza watched as comprehension dawned on Jackson's face, followed by confusion, then something unreadable. The moment stretched between them like pulled taffy, threatening to snap. "I should have told you," she said, words tumbling out before she could arrange them properly. "But I feared you'd rescind your offer, and we had nowhere else to go after the bank took our home. I couldn't bear to separate them. They're all I have left of my parents. I understand if this changes everything, but please know I'm prepared to work twice as hard to ensure they're never a burden." The platform had gone quiet around them, the few onlookers pretending not to notice the drama unfolding. The station master cleared his throat awkwardly and busied himself with the mail. "Sack." Jackson Reed looked past her to the children again, 4 pairs of eyes staring back with expressions ranging from William's defiance to little Emma's wide-eyed terror. His gaze then returned to Eliza, taking in her travel-worn appearance. Careful mending on her gloves, the determined set of her chin despite the fear evident in her eyes. "How far did you travel?" he asked, the question so unexpected that Eliza blinked in confusion. "From Ohio. 5 days by rail." He nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "Must have been exhausting for the little ones." "They've been remarkably brave," Eliza replied, uncertain where this was leading. Emma had nightmares the first night, but William helped calm her. Jackson's eyes softened as he looked at the oldest boy, who stood straighter under his scrutiny. "Stepped up as the man of the family, has he?" "Since our father passed, yes." A heavy silence fell between them. In the distance, the train's whistle blew, signaling its imminent departure. If he rejected them now, where would they go? Eliza had spent nearly everything they had on these one-way tickets, betting their future on the kindness of a stranger known only through carefully penned letters. Then Jackson Reed did something that stole the breath from her lungs. He placed his hat on his head, squared his shoulders, and walked past her directly to the children. He crouched down a considerable distance for a man of his height, until he was eye level with Emma, whose thumb had crept into her mouth despite William's gentle attempts to dissuade her. "Hello there," he said, his voice softer than Eliza had yet heard it. "You must be tired after such a long journey. My wagon's just across the way, and I've got a jar of peppermint sticks that Martha, that's my housekeeper, sent along." She thought they might be welcome after all that train food. Emma's eyes widened, her thumb slowly lowering. "Peppermint?" she whispered. "Biggest ones they sell at Donovan's General Store," Jackson confirmed with a solemn nod, as if discussing a matter of great importance. "Red stripes and everything." Charlotte, always the practical one, spoke up. "Are you very angry that we came too?" Jackson considered her question with appropriate gravity. "Well now, I don't recall inviting 4 extra guests to my home," he said, causing Eliza's heart to sink. But then he continued, "Though I suppose the house has been awful quiet since my Sarah passed. Too quiet, some might say, for a place built for a family." He straightened, towering over them once again, and looked back at Eliza. The expression on his face was complex surprise still evident, but something else too. Something that might have been understanding. "My wagon only has 1 bench seat," he said. "But the little ones can sit in the back with the luggage if we make a nest with the blankets. It's about an hour's ride to the ranch." Eliza felt hope flicker in her chest, fragile as a candle flame in wind. "Does this mean—" "It means I came to town expecting to bring home a wife, and instead I'm bringing home a family," Jackson interrupted, his tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. "It'll take some getting used to on all sides, I expect. But I'm not in the habit of leaving children stranded at railway stations." Relief washed over Eliza so powerfully her knees nearly buckled. "Thank you," she whispered. "I promise they're good children, well-behaved and willing to work. William's quite handy with tools. Charlotte can cook nearly as well as I can. And," Jackson raised a hand, gently cutting off her desperate salesmanship, "Miss Montgomery Eliza will have plenty of time to learn about each other on the ride home. For now, let's gather your things and get these young'uns somewhere they can rest properly." As they collected their modest luggage, Eliza couldn't help but notice how the townspeople watched them, curiosity evident in their stares. News of the mail-order bride's arrival had clearly been anticipated, but the addition of 4 children would be fodder for gossip for weeks to come. She lifted her chin, refusing to show any sign of shame or uncertainty. Whatever judgment came their way, they would weather it together. Jackson's wagon was well maintained, but clearly a working vehicle, not meant for comfort. He lifted the children into the back with an ease that spoke of a lifetime of physical labor, arranging blankets to cushion them against the rough ride ahead. William insisted on helping, earning an approving nod from the rancher. "Boy's got spirit," Jackson murmured to Eliza as they finished securing the luggage. Reminds me of myself at that age, carrying the weight of responsibilities too soon. He's had to grow up quickly, Eliza agreed, watching as William settled between his sisters, one arm protectively around Emma. They all have. When Jackson offered his hand to help her onto the bench seat, Eliza was struck by the contrast, her slender fingers nearly disappearing in his calloused palm. His strength was evident, yet his touch was carefully gentle, as if he was constantly mindful of his own power. She wondered if this same careful restraint would characterize their marriage. As the wagon pulled away from the station, Copper Creek revealed itself to be exactly the frontier town Eliza had imagined, a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a church steeple rising in the distance, women in practical calico, dresses hurrying about their errands while men in work clothes gathered in small groups to exchange news. It was a place built by people determined to carve civilization from wilderness, much like Jackson himself seemed to be. "Town's growing," he commented as they passed the newly constructed schoolhouse. "When I first came here 12 years ago, there wasn't much more than a trading post and a saloon. Now we've got nearly 400 souls living within 10 miles. "And your ranch?" Eliza asked, trying to picture the place that would become their home. Double R sits on 800 acres, about 6 miles out. Started with 100, built up the rest as I could. Good grazing land, creek running through it, year-round, timber enough for building. The house is solid, put it up myself with help from neighbors. 6 rooms, which seemed excessive when it was just me these past 3 years. His mention of the 6 rooms sent a wave of relief through Eliza. She had worried about where everyone would sleep, whether the children would be crammed together in some shed or outbuilding. 6 rooms meant space enough for all of them, though still close quarters for a family of their size. "You built it for your first wife?" she asked, then immediately regretted the question. His letters had mentioned his widowed status but offered few details about the woman he'd lost. "Built it for the family we planned to have," Jackson replied after a moment, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Sarah was with child when the fever took them both. He said it simply, without drama, but Eliza could hear the weight of grief beneath his words. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "That's a terrible loss. Been 4 years now. You can't outrun sorrow, but you can learn to carry it differently as time passes." He glanced at her. "I reckon you understand that better than most." Eliza nodded, thinking of her own parents, gone within months of each other. The sharp edges dull, but the weight remains. They fell into silence then, not uncomfortable but thoughtful. Behind them, the children had begun to relax, Charlotte pointing out interesting sights to her younger siblings as the wagon left the town behind and entered rolling grassland dotted with stands of pine. "Miss Montgomery," Jackson said finally, "I want to be clear about something. I didn't expect children, that's true enough, but I'm not sorry they're here." Eliza turned to him, surprised by the certainty in his voice. "You're not? A ranch is no place for solitude. Needs life to make it worth the work." He adjusted his grip on the reins, choosing his words carefully. "When Sarah died, I threw myself into building something that would last. More land, more cattle, better buildings. But at the end of each day, I came back to an empty house, started to wonder what it was all for." The wagon crested a small rise, and Eliza caught her first glimpse of what must be the Double R, a cluster of well-maintained buildings nestled in a gentle valley, a creek winding silver through green pastures where cattle grazed in scattered groups. A substantial 2-story house stood at the center, smoke curling from its chimney despite the summer heat. "Martha must be baking," Jackson noted, seeing the smoke. "She comes in 3 times a week to help with cooking and washing. Been with me since the beginning, lives in town with her brother's family." "She knows about me?" Eliza asked. "Knows I sent for a bride," Jackson confirmed. "Doesn't know about your siblings, though. That'll be a surprise for her, too." The children had fallen silent. taking in their first view of what would become their new home. Emma clutched her rag doll tighter, while William's expression had grown more guarded, as if he was already cataloging potential dangers and escape routes, a habit he'd developed in the difficult months after their parents' deaths. "It's beautiful," Eliza said, meaning it. After the cramped rooms they'd been forced to rent in Ohio, the open space and solid buildings of the Double R seemed like unimaginable luxury. "It's a working ranch," Jackson replied, though she caught a hint of pride in his voice. "Nothing fancy, but it's good land." As they drew closer, Eliza could see details that spoke of care and attention. The vegetable garden beside the house, the whitewashed fence around what appeared to be a small orchard, the clean, well-swept yard. This was not the home of a man who did things halfway. "I should warn you," Jackson said as they approached the final bend in the road. "I've got 3 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse. Good men, but rough around the edges. They weren't expecting children either." Eliza straightened her spine. "My siblings are accustomed to all sorts of company. They'll be respectful and stay out of the way." Jackson gave her a sidelong glance. "Wasn't worried about your family's behavior, Miss Montgomery. More concerned with how my men might adjust their language and habits. Been a bachelor establishment for some time now." Before Eliza could respond, they rounded the bend and entered the ranch yard proper. A woman emerged from the house, Martha, presumably wiping her hands on her apron, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She lifted a hand in greeting, then froze as she registered the extra passengers in the wagon. Jackson brought the horses to a stop and set the brake. He turned to Eliza, his expression impossible to read in the shadow of his hat brim. "Ready?" he asked simply. Eliza looked back at her siblings, then to the house that would either become their sanctuary or just another stop in a journey of uncertainty. "As I'll ever be," she replied. Jackson nodded, then stepped down from the wagon and walked around to offer her assistance. As her feet touched the ground of what might become her new home, Eliza felt the weight of the moment press upon her. Everything, their security, their future, the well-being of her siblings, depended on what happened in the next few minutes. Martha had recovered from her initial shock and was approaching, curiosity evident in her lined face. From the bunkhouse, the figures of men appeared, drawn by the wagon's arrival. William had climbed down and was helping his sisters, his protective stance more pronounced than ever. Jackson cleared his throat, his deep voice carrying across the yard. "Martha, everyone, I'd like you to meet Miss Eliza Montgomery, who's traveled all the way from Ohio to be my wife." He paused, then added with remarkable composure, "And these are her siblings, who'll be joining our household as well." Martha's eyebrows shot up nearly to her hairline, but to her credit, she recovered quickly. "Well now," she said, stepping forward to take Eliza's hands in her work-roughened ones, "isn't this a blessed surprise? The Lord works in mysterious ways, doesn't he? Just this morning I was telling Mr. Reed, this house needs more than just a woman's touch. It needs proper life in it again." The sincerity in the older woman's welcome brought tears to Eliza's eyes. "Thank you," she managed. "We're very grateful for your hospitality." "Hospitality nothing," Martha said firmly. "This is to be your home, all of you." She turned to the children, who had gathered in a tight cluster behind Eliza. "And who might these young ones be?" Eliza introduced each child, her heart warming as Martha greeted them individually, bending down to Emma's level, just as Jackson had done at the station. The ranch hands approached more cautiously, hats in hand, uncertainty evident in their weathered faces. "Boys," Jackson called to them, "appears we'll be making some changes around here. Mind your language and manners around the little ones." The men nodded, their expressions a mixture of surprise and curiosity. One older than the others, with a salt and pepper beard, stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said to Eliza with surprising gentleness, "welcome to the Double R. I'm Hank, foreman here for going on 10 years. These are Tom and Diego, We're at your service." Eliza was struck by the respect in his tone. "Thank you, Mr. Hank. I hope we won't disrupt your work too severely." The man actually smiled. "Been telling the boss for years this place needs some youngsters running about. Makes the work mean something." He nodded to William. "That boy looks strong enough to learn ranching, if he's of a mind." William straightened at being addressed directly by the foreman. "Yes, sir, I can work hard." "No doubt about that." Jackson interjected. "But schooling comes first. All of you," he added, looking at each of the children. "There's a good teacher in town, and I'll not have it said that children raised on the double R lack proper education." Eliza stared at him. This giant of a man who had just casually taken responsibility for her siblings' futures without hesitation. The realization of what he was offering, not just shelter, but a true home and opportunities, made her throat tighten with emotion. "Mr. Reed," she began, unsure how to express the depth of her gratitude. "Jackson," he corrected gently. "If we're to be married, you should use my given name." "Jackson," she amended, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "I don't know how to thank you for your kindness." Something softened in his blue eyes. "No need for thanks between family, Eliza, and that's what we'll be, isn't it? Family." The way he said it, with such simple certainty, made her heart swell with hope. Perhaps this arrangement, born of desperation on her part and loneliness on his, could become something more meaningful than either of them had dared to imagine. Martha broke the moment with practical concerns. "Those children must be famished after their journey. I've got fresh bread and stew that needs eating. Let's get everyone settled inside before the food gets cold." As they moved toward the house, Jackson fell into step beside Eliza. "I know this isn't exactly what either of us expected," he said. Quietly, "but I meant what I said. I believe there's a reason you all came into my life today." Eliza looked up at him, way up, and saw nothing but sincerity in his weathered face. "And what reason might that be?" Jackson's gaze swept over her siblings, already being ushered inside by the motherly Martha, then returned to her face. His answer was simple but profound in its honesty. The more the merrier. The summer kitchen was filled with the comforting aroma of Martha's beef stew as the Montgomery siblings clustered around the massive oak table. Eliza watched them with a mixture of relief and trepidation, relief that their journey had ended. In welcome rather than rejection, trepidation about what the future might hold. The children were uncharacteristically quiet, overwhelmed by the day's events and the unfamiliar surroundings. Jackson Reed sat at the head of the table, his large frame making the sturdy chair seem almost delicate. He'd removed his hat and coat, revealing sandy hair that curled slightly at the temples and a chambray shirt that stretched across broad shoulders. Despite his imposing size, there was nothing threatening in his demeanor as he watched Martha ladle generous portions into bowls. "Eat up," the housekeeper encouraged, placing a basket of fresh bread within reach of the children. Nothing restores the spirit like a full belly after a long journey. Emma, the youngest at 6, looked to Eliza for permission before reaching hesitantly for a slice. At her sister's nod, the child took a piece and bit into it, her eyes widening at the fresh-baked flavor. "It's so good," she whispered, as if afraid speaking too loudly might make the food disappear. Martha beamed. "There's plenty more where that came from, little one. And wait until you taste the blackberry preserves I put up last summer." Charlotte, always the practical one at 10, had been surveying the kitchen with a careful eye. "Your stove is much bigger than the one we had in Ohio," she observed. "I could help with the cooking if you'd allow it. Mama taught me her bread recipe before she died." Martha's expression softened. "I'd be delighted for the help, Miss Charlotte. A girl should know her way around a kitchen, though there's more to life than cooking for others, mind you." Jackson cleared his throat. "Martha comes in 3 days a week," he explained to Eliza. "Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays usually, though." She's made an exception today, being Saturday and all. I couldn't miss meeting the new mistress of the house, Martha said, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. Though I didn't expect she'd bring such a lively brood with her. Her tone held no reproach, only warmth. William, who had been silently assessing everything with the wariness of a child who'd known too much disappointment, finally spoke. "Sir," he addressed Jackson, sitting up straighter, "I want you to know I can earn my keep. I'm strong for my age, and I learn quick." Eliza felt her heart constrict. At 12, William shouldn't be worrying about earning his keep, but the past year had robbed him of any childish certainty that the world would provide. Jackson regarded the boy thoughtfully. "I've no doubt about that, William. But as I said earlier, your schooling comes first. A man needs his letters and figures, especially out here where a handshake agreement can mean the difference between prosperity and ruin." "But I could help before and after school," William persisted. "And during summer months." "That seems fair," Jackson conceded with a slight nod. "We'll start slow, mind you. Ranching work can be dangerous for those who don't know what they're about. Hank will show you the basics: feeding animals, mucking stalls, nothing that puts you at risk." Henry, the 8-year-old with perpetually skinned knees and a gap where his front teeth had been, perked up. "Can I help too? I'm good with animals." A hint of a smile touched Jackson's lips. "We've got a new foal that could use some gentle handling. His mama's skittish around men, but she might take to a boy with a soft touch." Henry's face lit up with such joy that Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. It had been months since she'd seen that expression on any of her siblings' faces. "What about the girls?" Charlotte asked, a slight edge to her voice. "Is it just cooking and cleaning for us?" Eliza opened her mouth to admonish her sister for the impertinent question, but Jackson spoke first. "My mother ran our family ranch in Wyoming for 15 years after my father was killed in a stampede," he said evenly. "She could rope, ride, and shoot as well as any man, better than most. On a frontier ranch, everyone learns to do what needs doing, regardless of weather. They're wearing trousers or skirts." Charlotte's eyes widened. "Your mother ran a whole ranch by herself?" "With help from hands and neighbors, yes," Jackson confirmed. "And she made sure I knew how to cook and mend as well as work cattle. Said a man who can't feed himself or fix his own clothes has no business living alone." Martha chuckled. "Elizabeth Reed was a force of nature, God rest her soul. Would have approved of you bringing this ready-made family home, I suspect." Eliza, who had been quietly observing the interactions, felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. "You're very kind, both of you," she said softly. "When I wrote to Mr. Reed to Jackson, I never imagined such a welcome." She hesitated, then added with quiet dignity, "I should be clear that I don't expect charity. I'm a hard worker, and once the children are settled, I'll pull my weight." Jackson's gaze met hers across the table, something unreadable in his blue eyes. "I didn't send for a wife because I needed another ranch hand, Eliza. I have good men for that." "Then why did you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. A flush crept up his neck, visible even beneath his tan. "Because a house needs a heart to be a home," he said simply. "And I reckon 5 hearts are better than one." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the Kotu story. After the meal, Martha showed them through the house. It was larger than Eliza had dared hope, a spacious main floor with the kitchen, dining room, and a comfortable parlor with bookshelves that sparked excitement in William's eyes. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms and a small sewing room that Martha suggested could be converted for Emma. "The master bedroom is at the end of the hall," Martha explained, opening a door to reveal a large room with a 4-poster bed, handcrafted dresser, and washstand. Mr. Reed had this furniture made special by a carpenter in Helena when he built the house. Eliza stepped inside, running her fingers over the smooth wood of the bedpost. The room was masculine but not austere. A colorful quilt covered the bed, and curtains softened the windows that looked out over the pastures. "It's beautiful," she murmured, trying not to think about the implications of sharing this intimate space with a man she barely knew. Martha, perceptive as ever, patted her arm. "Mr. Reed will take the small room downstairs until after the wedding," she said quietly. "He's a gentleman through and through." Relief washed over Eliza. In the rush of events, she hadn't even considered the sleeping arrangements. "When does he expect the wedding to take place?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's for you two to decide," Martha replied. "Though I'd imagine he'll want to speak with Reverend Collins soon. No sense in causing gossip with a long engagement, not with children in the house." The practical consideration made Eliza nod. Her reputation was one thing, but she wouldn't allow her siblings to face frontier censure. "I'll speak with him tonight," she decided. "The sooner we're properly settled, the better for everyone." Martha smiled approvingly, a sensible approach. "Now let's get these youngsters situated. I've fresh linens in the cupboard, and we can have beds made up in no time." By sunset, the children were installed in their new rooms, William in one, Henry in another, and the girls sharing the third bedroom until the sewing room could be prepared for Emma. The house felt different already, filled with the quiet chatter of children exploring their new surroundings and Martha's patient explanations of household routines. Jackson had retreated to the barn after dinner, giving them space to settle in. Eliza found herself standing on the wide front porch as twilight deepened, watching the last golden rays illuminate the distant mountains. The landscape was unlike anything she'd known in Ohio, vast, wild, breathtakingly beautiful. "Different view than you're used to?" Jackson's deep voice came from behind her as he climbed the porch steps, a bundle of firewood in his arms. "Very," she admitted. "In Ohio, you can't see more than a mile in any direction because of the trees. Here, it feels like you can see forever." He set the wood down by the door and came to stand beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "Takes some getting used to. Some folks find it overwhelming, all that open space. Makes them feel small." "And you?" He considered the question, taking it seriously. "Makes me feel free, like there's room to breathe, to grow. Room for dreams to take shape." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "Mr. Reed Jackson," Eliza began, her hands clasped tightly before her, "I think we should discuss the wedding." His expression remained calm, but she noticed his posture straighten slightly. "I agree. I've spoken with Reverend Collins already, actually. He comes through town once a month for services. He'll be here next Sunday." "So soon?" Eliza couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "If that's agreeable to you," he added quickly. "I thought with the children and all it might be best not to delay. But if you need more time—" Eliza asked softly, finding courage in the gathering darkness. "From this marriage, from me?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was low and thoughtful. "Companionship, respect, a partner who'll stand beside me through whatever comes. Someone to share the good days and help shoulder the burden of the bad ones." He paused, then added, "In time, perhaps children of our own to join this ready-made family you've brought." The mention of children sent heat rushing to Eliza's cheeks, though the practical nature of the discussion kept her from true embarrassment. This was, after all, a business arrangement at its core, despite the possibility of deeper feelings developing later. "And affection?" she found herself asking. "Do you expect that as well?" Jackson's eyes, now silvered in the moonlight, met hers. "I expect nothing that isn't freely given, Eliza. I hope for affection, yes. Maybe even love someday. But I won't demand what can only be offered willingly." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her. This man, this giant of a stranger who had welcomed her siblings without hesitation, was offering her something precious, choice within commitment. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything you've done today. For not turning us away when you saw the children. Some might call it foolishness," he said with a slight smile. "Taking on 5 strangers instead of 1. Is that what you think? It was? Foolishness?" He considered this, his large hands resting on the porch railing. "No," he said finally. "It felt right. Like pieces falling into place that I didn't even know were missing." Before Eliza could respond, the front door opened behind them and William appeared, his expression guarded. "Emma's having nightmares again," he reported. "She's asking for you, Lisa." "I'll come right away," Eliza said, turning toward the door. She paused, looking back at Jackson. "I should go," he said gently. "Your sister needs you. We can continue our talk another time." As Eliza followed William inside, she felt Jackson's gaze on her back, not intrusive, but attentive. Protective. Even. It was a strange feeling, having someone else concerned for her welfare after months of carrying every burden alone. In the girl's room, she found Emma curled into a tight ball on the bed, her small face wet with tears. Charlotte sat beside her, stroking her hair with awkward affection. "She dreamed about the train going off the tracks," Charlotte explained. As Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, "Oh, sweetheart," Eliza gathered the little girl into her arms. "The train journey is over. We're safe now. But what if he changes his mind?" Emma whispered, her voice muffled against Eliza's shoulder. "What if he sends us away like Uncle George did?" The mention of their father's brother, who had refused to take them in after their parents' deaths, sent a spike of anger through Eliza's heart. "That won't happen," she said firmly. "Mr. Reed Jackson isn't like Uncle George. He's a man of his word." "How do you know?" William asked from the doorway, doubt evident in his young voice. "You only just met him today." It was a fair question, and Eliza considered it carefully, aware that her siblings needed more than empty reassurances. "I know because he could have turned us away at the station, but he didn't. I know because he's already making plans for your schooling and finding ways for each of you to belong here." She stroked Emma's hair. "I know because good men exist. In this world, William, even if we haven't had much evidence of it lately." Charlotte, practical as ever, spoke up. "I like him," she declared. "He doesn't talk to us like we're stupid just because we're children. And did you see the books in the parlor? Hundreds of them." 217, William corrected. Unable to hide his own interest, "I counted. He has Jules Verne and Mark Twain." Henry appeared behind his brother, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "And he said I could help with the foal," he added, clearly still excited by the prospect. Eliza looked at her siblings, tired, wary, but showing the first tentative signs of hope, and felt her own heart lighten. "Then I think we should give him a chance, don't you? Give ourselves a chance at a new beginning here." Emma sniffled, pulling back to look up at her sister with red-rimmed eyes. "Can I still keep Mama's locket? The one with her picture inside?" "Of course, sweetheart," Eliza assured her. "No one will ever take away your memories of Mama and Papa. But I think they'd be happy knowing we found a safe place to land." After settling Emma back to sleep, with Charlotte protectively curled beside her, Eliza herded the boys back to their rooms. William lingered in his doorway, his expression serious beyond his years. "Liza," he said quietly, using the nickname. "Only family was permitted. Are you really going to marry him? A complete stranger?" Eliza sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "He's not a complete stranger, Will. We've been corresponding for months." "Letters aren't the same as knowing someone," her brother insisted. "Papa always said you should marry for love." The mention of their father brought a sad smile to Eliza's lips. "Papa also said that love can grow in unlikely soil, with patience and care." Not every great love story starts with thunderbolts and racing hearts. William considered this, his young brow furrowed in thought. Just promise you won't let him hurt you, he said finally, or any of us. Eliza reached out to smooth back his unruly hair, a gesture he would have rejected as childish just months ago, but now accepted with quiet dignity. I promise to protect all of us, Will, just as I always have. As she closed his door and made her way to the master bedroom, her bedroom now, at least temporarily, Eliza felt the weight of that promise. She had brought her siblings across half a continent on the strength of a stranger's letters and her own desperate hope. Now they were here, in his home, dependent on his continued goodwill. Yet something about Jackson Reed inspired trust. Not blind faith, but a measured confidence in his fundamental decency. He was a man who built things to last: his ranch, his home, and now, perhaps, this unlikely family cobbled together from loss and hope. Through the open window, Eliza could hear the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the soft nickering of horses in the barn, the chorus of crickets and frogs from the creek. Different from the city noises of Ohio, but somehow soothing in their wild harmony. She changed into her nightgown and sat at the dressing table, unbraiding her hair. In the mirror's reflection, she studied her own face, the green eyes shadowed with fatigue, the stubborn chin lifted despite uncertainty, the auburn hair falling in waves to her waist. At 24, she was no longer the carefree girl who had once dreamed of romance and adventure. Life had tempered those dreams with responsibility and grief. Yet here she was, on the edge of a new frontier, both literal and figurative. Perhaps this marriage of convenience would remain just that, a practical arrangement beneficial to both parties. Or perhaps, as her father had suggested, love might indeed grow in this unlikely soil. Either way, Eliza Montgomery soon to be. Eliza Reed was determined to make the best of the chance they'd been given. For herself, for her siblings, and for the solemn giant of a man who had opened his home to them all. Sunday dawned bright and clear, the kind of autumn morning that painted the Montana landscape in gold and amber. Eliza woke early, her body still attuned to the rhythms of her former life where dawn meant chores and responsibilities. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, the unfamiliar ceiling, the too soft bed, the absence of city sounds. Then memory flooded back. The Double R Ranch, Jackson Reed, the unexpected welcome that had greeted her and her siblings. She dressed quickly in one of her two good dresses, smoothing the faded blue cotton with careful hands. "Having second thoughts?" he asked quietly, no judgment in his tone. The directness of the question surprised her, but Eliza appreciated his straightforward approach. "Not second thoughts exactly," she replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "More like wondering if I'm doing right by everyone involved, including yourself." His perceptiveness was becoming less surprising with each passing day. "Perhaps especially myself," she admitted. "I've spent the past year making decisions based solely on what would keep my siblings safe and fed. I haven't had the luxury of considering my own wants since our parents died." Jackson nodded, understanding in his blue eyes. "And now you're about to marry a stranger because it seemed the best option for them." "You're not exactly a stranger anymore," Eliza said, surprising herself with the realization that it was true. In just a week, Jackson Reed had revealed himself to be thoughtful, kind, steadfast qualities that resonated far more deeply than the superficial attractions she'd once thought essential to romance. "No?" A slight smile touched his lips. "What am I then?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Eliza considered her answer carefully. "You're the man who took in 5 desperate strangers without hesitation, who teaches William patience while he learns to split logs, who endures Charlotte's endless questions about ranch operations with remarkable forbearance, who lets Henry follow him around like a second shadow, who sits with Emma when she has nightmares, She met his gaze directly. "You're becoming family, Jackson Reed." Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a warming that transformed his face. "I believe that's the nicest thing anyone said to me in a very long time." Emboldened by his response, Eliza continued, "I want you to know that while our arrangement began as a practical solution to both our problems, I'm committed to building something real here. Not just for the children's sake, but for ours as well." Jackson pushed away from the doorframe and took a step into the kitchen, close enough that Eliza had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "What does something real look like to you, Eliza Montgomery?" His nearness made her heart beat faster, though not from fear. "Respect," she said, echoing his own words from their porch conversation. "Companionship, partnership." She hesitated, then added softly, "and perhaps in time genuine affection." Jackson's hand moved slowly, deliberately, giving her plenty of time to step away if she wished. When she didn't, his fingers gently brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, the touch feather-light despite his calloused skin. "I'd like that very much," he said, his voice lower than usual. "And I want you to know that while I may have sent for a wife out of loneliness, what I've found in you, in all of you, is far more than I dared hope for." The moment hung suspended between them, intimate and charged with unspoken possibility. Then Emma's voice called from upstairs, "Liza, Charlotte won't let me try on my flower girl dress." And reality reasserted itself. Jackson stepped back, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Duty calls, it seems." Eliza nodded, oddly disappointed at the interruption. "It always does. We'll have time," he said simply. "After Sunday, we'll have all the time we need." As she headed upstairs to mediate the latest sibling dispute, Eliza found herself looking forward to Sunday with far more anticipation than anxiety. The wedding day dawned clear and cool, autumn making its presence known in the crisp morning air. Martha arrived at sunrise, bustling into the kitchen with a basket of fresh pastries and enough nervous energy to power the entire ranch. "Brides don't belong in kitchens on their wedding day," she declared, shooing Eliza back upstairs. "I've brought Susan Watson and her daughter to help with your hair and dress. They're just behind me." Indeed, the Watson women arrived moments later, carrying mysterious parcels and wearing expressions of determined festivity. Susan, the blacksmith's wife, had been particularly welcoming during their church appearance, inviting the children to her home for cookies after the service. "Every bride deserves a proper fussing over," she announced, unpacking combs and ribbons on the dressing table, "even if the circumstances are a bit unconventional." Her daughter, Abigail, a pretty girl of about 16, nodded enthusiastically. "I've been practicing hairstyles all week," she said, showing Eliza a sketch of an elaborate updo with flowers woven through the braids. For the next 2 hours, Eliza surrendered to their ministrations, allowing herself to be pampered in ways she hadn't experienced since before her parents' deaths. Sarah Reed's wedding dress had been beautifully altered to fit her frame, the ivory silk now flowing properly over her curves. The lace at the collar and cuffs mended so expertly the repairs were invisible. "You look like an illustration from Godey's Lady's Book," Charlotte breathed when she was finally allowed to enter the bedroom. Her own dress was new, a surprise from Jackson, who had arranged for the seamstress in town to outfit all the children for the ceremony. "Do I?" Eliza turned to the mirror and barely recognized the woman who stared back. Her auburn hair was arranged in intricate braids atop her head, tiny white flowers woven throughout. The dress, simple but elegant, emphasized her slender waist and graceful neck. A hint of color had been pinched into her cheeks, and her green eyes seemed brighter, more alive than they had in months. "You look like Mama in her wedding portrait," William said from the doorway, his voice catching slightly. It was the highest compliment he could offer, and Eliza felt tears threatening to ruin Susan's careful work. "Thank you," she whispered, reaching out to squeeze his hand. At 12, William was growing into a young man before her eyes, his childhood receding with each responsibility he shouldered. Today he would stand as the male representative of their family, giving Eliza away in their father's absence. "Jackson's already left for the church with Hank," he reported. "Said it's bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony." The mention of Jackson sent a flutter of nerves through Eliza's stomach. Not anxiety, exactly, more like anticipation. She was about to bind her life to his, committing to a partnership that began in practicality, but now held the promise of something deeper. "Well then," she said, smoothing her skirts, "we shouldn't keep him waiting, should we?" The small church was transformed when they arrived. Wildflowers adorned every pew, their autumn colors creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere. Nearly everyone in Copper Creek had turned out for the event, curiosity mingling with genuine goodwill as they filed into the wooden benches. At the front of the church, Jackson waited, and the sight of him momentarily stopped Eliza's breath. He wore a new black suit, his broad shoulders filling it impressively, his sandy hair neatly combed, his beard trimmed. But it was his expression, when he turned and saw her, that truly caught her heart, a look of such open wonder and admiration that for a moment she felt like the most beautiful woman in the world. William escorted her down the aisle with solemn dignity, Emma preceding them, scattering flower petals with enthusiastic abandon. Charlotte and Henry followed behind, their faces a mixture of excitement and nervousness as all eyes turned to watch the unusual wedding party. When they reached the altar, William placed Eliza's hand in Jackson's much larger one, the gesture symbolic of the responsibility being transferred. But he added his own touch, leaning up to whisper something in Jackson's ear that made the big man's eyes widen slightly, then crinkle with warm humor as he nodded in response. "What did you say to him?" Eliza whispered as William took his place beside Henry. "Told him I'd be watching to make sure he keeps his promises," William whispered back, a hint of the boy he still was peeking through his serious demeanor. "Reverend." Collins began the ceremony with a scripture reading about Ruth's devotion to Naomi, an unconventional choice that acknowledged the blended family being formed today was about more than just bride and groom. The message was clear. This union was creating bonds not just between husband and wife, but between a man and the siblings who came as part of the package. When it came time for the vows, Jackson's deep voice filled the small church, steady and sure as he promised to love, honor, and cherish Eliza all the days of his life. His hands, holding hers, were gentle despite their size and strength, much like the man himself, Eliza realized. Her own vows were spoken with growing confidence, the words no longer feeling like a business arrangement, but a genuine commitment to building a life together. When she promised to be a faithful wife and partner, she meant every word, not out of desperate necessity, but from emerging respect and affection for the man before her. After Reverend Collins pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson leaned down to place a chaste kiss on Eliza's lips, their first physical expression of affection. It was brief but tender, a promise rather than a demand, and Eliza found herself smiling up at him as they turned to face their applauding neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Jackson read. The celebration afterwards was modest but joyful tables set up in the churchyard, food contributed by neighbors in the tradition of frontier communities, fiddle music provided by the blacksmith and his sons. Children ran between the tables, playing tag and stealing extra slices of cake when mothers weren't looking. Emma joined them without hesitation, her initial shyness forgotten in the excitement of the day. Charlotte found herself surrounded by girls her own age, eagerly answering questions about life in Ohio and her journey west. Henry was deep in conversation with the blacksmith about horseshoes and their importance to a working ranch. And William, to Eliza's surprise, was engaged in what appeared to be a serious discussion with Hank and several other ranchers, his expression intent as he absorbed their knowledge. "They're adapting quickly," Jackson observed, appearing at Eliza's side with 2 plates of food. Children are resilient that way. More resilient than adults, sometimes, Eliza agreed, accepting the offered plate gratefully. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the aroma of roast beef and fresh bread reached her nose. "I don't know about that," Jackson said, his gaze sweeping over her with quiet admiration. "Takes considerable resilience to travel halfway across the country with 4 children in tow, based on nothing but letters from a stranger." "Not a stranger anymore," Eliza reminded him, finding it easier than expected to return his warm gaze. "My husband now." The word felt new and strange on her tongue, but not unpleasantly so. Husband, a partner, a protector, a companion for the journey ahead, perhaps even, someday, a true love. "Indeed I am," Jackson replied, his voice dropping to a register that sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. "And you are my wife." Wife, the counterpart to husband, equally weighted with significance. Not just a housekeeper or caretaker for his home, but a true partner in all things. At least that was the promise contained in their vows today. As the afternoon stretched into evening, neighbors began to depart, offering congratulations and well wishes. The children grew tired, even Emma's boundless energy finally flagging as the excitement of the day caught up with her. Jackson arranged for Hank to drive them home in the wagon, while he and Eliza would follow later in the buggy he'd borrowed for the occasion. A few moments of peace before returning to the happy chaos, he explained when the children looked disappointed at the separation. "Your sister and I will be home before you know it." As they waved goodbye to the departing wagon, Eliza felt a momentary pang of uncertainty. This was it, the beginning of their life together as husband and wife, with all that entailed. The privacy of the buggy ride home seemed suddenly intimate in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. Jackson, ever perceptive, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Just a ride home, Eliza," he said softly. "Nothing more need happen tonight than you're comfortable with. We have time to grow into all aspects of marriage." The simple statement, acknowledging her unspoken concerns without her having to voice them, cemented Eliza's growing certainty that she had made the right decision. This man, her husband, understood the delicate balance between duty and desire, between what was expected and what was right. "Thank you," she said, meeting his gaze directly, "for understanding, for everything." As they rode home through the gathering dusk, the Montana landscape spread before them in purple and gold. Eliza felt something unfamiliar but welcome unfurling in her chest. Hope. Not just for survival or basic security, but for genuine happiness. For the first time since her parents' deaths, she allowed herself to imagine a future filled with more than just responsibility and worry, a future that included joy, partnership, and perhaps even love. Jackson Reed might not have been the husband she'd once dreamed of as a young girl, but he was proving to be exactly the man she needed. They all needed to build a new life in this wild, beautiful land. The autumn days melted into winter with surprising swiftness, bringing with them the rhythms of ranch life that soon became familiar to Eliza and her siblings. Jackson had been right about Montana winters. They were fierce, with snowdrifts that sometimes reached the windowsills and winds that howled like hungry wolves across the plains. But inside the solid walls of the Double R's main house, warmth prevailed, both literal and figurative. By Christmas, 3 months after their arrival, the transformation was remarkable. The Montgomery siblings no longer moved through the house like cautious visitors afraid of disturbing the peace. They had claimed spaces, established routines, left their marks in ways both subtle and obvious. Henry's collection of interesting rocks on the porch railing, Charlotte's carefully tended indoor herbs on the kitchen windowsill, William's books spread across the parlor table, Emma's colorful drawings pinned to the walls. And Jackson, Eliza noticed with quiet joy, seemed to thrive amidst the cheerful chaos that 4 children inevitably created. The somber widower who had met them at the station had gradually given way to a man who laughed more easily, who initiated games of checkers with William in the evenings, who patiently taught Charlotte to whittle, who allowed Henry to help with ranch accounts by counting stacks of pennies, who carried Emma on his shoulders during walks to the creek to check for those elusive fairies. The transition to husband and wife had been more gradual, more careful, a slow dance of growing intimacy that Jackson never rushed. The first night after their wedding, true to his word, he had asked for nothing more than a goodnight kiss, gentle and undemanding. In the weeks that followed, they had learned each other in increments, the comfort of shared conversation as they sat on the porch after the children were asleep, the casual touch of hands as they passed each other in hallways, the gradual shift from formality to easy familiarity. When Eliza finally invited him to her bed, their bed a month after the wedding, it was with certainty rather than duty. Jackson had made her feel cherished, respected, and deeply desired, without ever making her feel pressured. Their physical union had been a natural progression of the bond growing between them, tender and considerate at first, then increasingly passionate as Eliza discovered aspects of herself she'd never known existed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now as January's harsh grip held the landscape in frozen stillness, Eliza stood at the kitchen window watching Jackson and William clearing a path to the barn through the latest snowfall. The contrast between them was striking. Jackson towering and broad-shouldered, William still gangly with adolescence, but growing stronger each day under his brother-in-law's patient guidance. Brother-in-law. The term seemed inadequate for what Jackson had become to the children. With William especially, he had formed a bond that went beyond simple mentorship. He'd recognized the boy's hunger for knowledge and responsibility, his need to feel capable and valued after months of helplessness in the face of family tragedy. Instead of dismissing William as too young, Jackson had drawn him into the workings of the ranch, teaching him skills that built confidence along with competence. A familiar wave of nausea interrupted Eliza's thoughts, and she pressed a hand to her still flat stomach. The secret she carried was just weeks old, confirmed by Martha's knowing eyes and experienced hands. A child, hers and Jackson's, growing beneath her heart, a physical manifestation of the love that had blossomed between them. She hadn't told him yet. The news felt too precious, too fragile to share immediately, though she knew he would be overjoyed. Jackson had never pressed about children of their own, had embraced her siblings so completely that the absence of biological offspring seemed inconsequential. But she had seen the wistfulness in his eyes when Emma climbed onto his lap for bedtime stories, had noticed how he sometimes gazed at infant baptisms in church with a mixture of joy and sorrow. "You're looking mighty thoughtful this morning," Martha observed, entering the kitchen with an armload of freshly folded linens. The housekeeper's role had evolved since the family's arrival. She still came 3 days a week, but now worked alongside Eliza and Charlotte rather than managing the household alone. "Just watching the men work," Eliza replied, though her hand remained unconsciously on her abdomen. Martha's sharp eyes missed nothing. "When do you plan to tell him?" Eliza smiled, no longer surprised by the older woman's perceptiveness. "Soon, perhaps tonight, after the children are asleep." She turned from the window. "Do you think they'll be happy about it? The children, I mean. It's such a big change, especially for William. Those young'uns?" Martha chuckled, setting down her burden on the kitchen table. "Emma's been praying for a baby since October. Heard her myself when she thought no one was listening. Charlotte's practically a mother hen already. Henry will be thrilled to have someone smaller than himself to lord over. And William." She paused, considering. "That boy loves you something fierce, Eliza. He'll see this baby as one more person to protect, one more reason to grow into the man he's becoming." The assessment brought tears to Eliza's eyes, pregnancy making her Emotions flow closer to the surface. I want so much for all of them, she admitted. Sometimes I worry it's not enough what we can provide here. Martha's weathered hand covered Eliza's where it rested on the table. Child, listen to me. These past months, I've watched those siblings of yours transform from frightened, rootless waifs into confident, joyful children. William walks tall now, knowing he has purpose in place. Charlotte's found her voice instead of just echoing others. Henry's wildness has direction instead of desperation. And Emma, well, that little one blooms like a flower in sunshine. The description was so accurate that Eliza felt fresh tears welling. It was true the changes in her siblings had been profound. The constant worry that had shadowed William's eyes had given way to purposeful determination. Charlotte's practical nature had softened with security, allowing her natural compassion to flourish. Henry's boundless energy had found constructive outlets in ranch work and school projects. And Emma, sweet Emma, no longer woke screaming from nightmares, no longer clung to Eliza's skirts in fear of abandonment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And as for you, Martha continued, her voice gentle but firm, you're not just surviving anymore, are you? You're living, loving. The simple truth of it struck Eliza with unexpected force. Yes, she was living, rather than merely surviving, had been almost from the moment Jackson welcomed them into his home, his life, his heart. The constant knot of anxiety that had been her companion through the desperate months after her parents' deaths had unraveled, replaced by a steady certainty that whatever challenges came, they would face them together. The back door opened then, bringing a gust of cold air and the stomping of snow-covered boots. Jackson and William entered together, cheeks ruddy from exertion and cold breath visible in the warm kitchen air. Paths clear to the barn and chicken coop, Jackson reported, helping William remove his heavy coat. Should hold until the next storm blows through. Which won't be long if my knees any judge, Martha added, rubbing the joint in question. Weather's fixing to turn nasty again by nightfall. William headed upstairs to change his damp clothes, but Jackson lingered in the kitchen, his gaze settling on Eliza with the quiet appreciation that still made her heart beat faster after months of marriage. Everything all right? He asked, noticing her tear-brightened eyes. You look happy, Eliza supplied, and meant it. Just happy. Something in her tone must have conveyed deeper meaning, because Jackson's expression shifted to one of focused attention. He glanced at Martha, who was suddenly very busy organizing linens. I believe I'll go check on those children, the housekeeper announced with transparent casualness. Make sure they're ready for their lessons. Teacher said she'd try to make it out today, weather permitting. When they were alone, Jackson crossed to Eliza in 2 long strides, his hands coming to rest gently on her shoulders. What is it, Eliza? Something's different. She reached up to touch his bearded cheek, still cold from the outdoor work. Something is, she agreed softly. Something wonderful. Understanding dawned in his blue eyes, hope and wonder replacing concern. Are you? Eliza nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. Around midsummer, Martha thinks. A baby, Jackson. Our baby. For a moment, he seemed frozen, his expression one of stunned disbelief. Then, with surprising gentleness for such a large man, he gathered her into an embrace that felt like coming home. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I never thought after Sarah, I didn't dare hope for this again. He pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. Are you happy about it? Truly? Truly, Eliza confirmed, her heart full. Though I worry about telling the children. It's another big change for them to accept. Jackson's laugh was warm against her hair. Those children have been dropping hints for weeks. Emma asked me just yesterday if I thought babies liked snow. William's been constructing a cradle in the workshop when he thinks I'm not looking. Surprised, Eliza pulled back to search his face. They knew before we did? They hoped, Jackson corrected. Same as I did, if I'm being honest. Not that. Your siblings aren't enough family for any man. But the thought of a child, our child. He placed a gentle hand over her still flat stomach, wonder evident in his touch. The tenderness of the gesture brought fresh tears to Eliza's eyes. This man who had welcomed 4 unexpected children into his life without hesitation was now facing the prospect of fatherhood with the same open-hearted courage. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that she had not just married well, but loved well, perhaps not from the beginning, but certainly now deeply and completely. "I love you, Jackson Reed," she said, the words coming naturally despite it being the first time she had spoken them aloud. They had been growing in her heart for months, taking root in fertile soil made of small kindnesses, shared laughter, gentle touches, and unwavering support. His eyes, when they met hers, held a depth of emotion that needed no words, though he offered them anyway. "And I love you, Eliza Reed, have since you stood on that platform defending your family with the courage of a lioness." He smiled, pressing his forehead to hers. "Though I must admit, I did wonder what I'd gotten myself into when I realized there were 5 of you instead of 1. "Best bargain you ever made," she teased, her arms tightening around his waist. "Without question," he agreed solemnly. "And about to get even better, it seems." The sound of footsteps on the stairs broke the intimate moment. William appeared in the doorway, his expression shifting from purpose to embarrassment as he registered the embrace he had interrupted. "Sorry," he mumbled, turning to leave. "Stay, Will," Eliza called, keeping one arm around Jackson's waist but extending the other toward her brother. "We have news we'd like to share with you first, before the others." William approached cautiously, his growth spurt of the past months making him nearly eye level with Eliza now. At 12, nearly 13, he stood on the threshold of young manhood, his voice occasionally cracking, his shoulders beginning to broaden with physical labor. "What kind of news?" he asked, a hint of wariness in his tone that reminded Eliza of how many difficult announcements he had endured in his young life. "The kind worth celebrating," Jackson assured him, his deep voice warm with affection for this boy who had become so much more than a brother-in-law to him. "Your sister is going to have a baby around midsummer." William's expression transformed surprise, then comprehension, then a smile that revealed the boy beneath the serious exterior he so often maintained. "I knew it. Charlotte said so too. But Emma wouldn't believe us until we had proof." Eliza laughed, relief and joy mingling. "So you've all been discussing this behind our backs?" "Not behind your backs exactly," William hedged, looking sheepish. "More like wondering, hoping, maybe." "You're happy about it then?" Eliza asked, needing to hear it directly. William's expression softened into something rare and precious pure, uncomplicated happiness. "Course I am, Liza. It's what families do, isn't it? Grow." The simple wisdom in his words struck both adults silent for a moment. This boy, who had shouldered so much responsibility at such a young age, understood intuitively what had taken them months to fully comprehend, that family wasn't just about blood or legal ties, but about the choice to grow together, to build something greater than the sum of its parts. "That's exactly right, Will," Jackson said, clapping a hand on the boy's shoulder with evident pride. "And this family's done nothing but grow stronger since the day you all stepped off that train." The news spread quickly through the household, met with the enthusiasm Jackson had predicted. Emma was ecstatic at the prospect of no longer being the youngest. Charlotte immediately began planning nursery arrangements, and Henry declared his intention to teach the baby everything important about ranch life, once it's big enough to walk proper. As winter gave way to spring, and spring blossomed into summer, the anticipation of new life became the centerpiece around which ranch activities revolved. Jackson expanded the master bedroom to create a connected nursery, with William proudly contributing the cradle he'd been secretly crafting for months. Charlotte sewed tiny garments from fabric Martha provided, her stitches growing neater with each project. Henry collected soft feathers to stuff a small pillow, while Emma created colorful paper decorations to hang above the cradle, so the baby has pretty things to look at. The community of Copper Creek embraced the news with similar enthusiasm. The initial curiosity about the mail-order bride and her unexpected siblings had long since given way to genuine acceptance and support. Neighbors brought baby gifts, offered advice, solicited and otherwise, and assured Eliza that the journey of motherhood, while challenging, was the most rewarding one she would ever undertake. On a scorching July afternoon, with summer thunderheads building on the horizon, Eliza's water broke while she was teaching Charlotte to make strawberry preserves. Jackson, who had refused to venture far from the house as her time approached, carried her upstairs with remarkable gentleness for such a large man, his calm exterior betraying only slight cracks of anxiety as Martha took charge of the birthing room. The labor was long but uncomplicated, with Martha's experienced hands guiding the process and Jackson's steady presence providing strength when Eliza's began to flag. As twilight painted the sky in purple and gold, their daughter entered the world with a robust cry that immediately captivated her father's heart. "She's perfect," Jackson whispered, cradling the tiny bundle with hands that suddenly seemed impossibly large against her delicate form. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and her mother's spirit already. Eliza, exhausted but radiant, reached out to trace the downy curve of her daughter's cheek. "She has your eyes," she observed, noting the clear blue that would likely darken with time, "and your determination. Did you hear how she announced herself?" Jackson laughed softly, mindful of the sleeping infant. "Like a cattle call at roundup," he agreed proudly. "She'll make herself heard in this family, that's certain." When the siblings were finally allowed to meet their new niece, their reactions were everything Eliza had hoped for. William approached with uncharacteristic hesitation, his expression softening as the baby gripped his finger with surprising strength. Charlotte cooed and fussed, adjusting the blanket with maternal instinct beyond her years. Henry examined the infant with scientific curiosity, declaring her smaller than the foal but definitely smarter looking. And Emma, sweet Emma, climbed carefully onto the bed beside Eliza and whispered a solemn promise to be the best aunt ever. "Even though I'm still little myself, what will you call her?" Charlotte asked, gently stroking the baby's wisp of reddish hair. Eliza glanced at Jackson, who nodded encouragement. They had discussed names at length, wanting something that honored the past while celebrating the future they were building together. "Hope," Eliza said softly. "Hope Elizabeth Reed." "For your mother," William noted, recognizing their mother's middle name. "And for what she represents to all of us," Jackson added, his gaze encompassing everyone in the room, the family that had come together through circumstance, choice, and love. As summer mellowed into autumn, marking a full year since the Montgomerys had arrived at the Double R, the changes were evident to anyone with eyes to see. The ranch itself had prospered, with careful management and hard-working hands expanding the operation beyond what Jackson had managed alone. The house had transformed from a well-built but sterile dwelling into a true home, filled with evidence of the lives being lived within its walls. But the most profound changes were in the people themselves. William, now 13, had grown not just in height but in confidence, dividing his time between school studies, where he excelled, and ranch work, where he was showing remarkable aptitude. Charlotte, at 11, had blossomed from a too serious child into a balanced young lady, nurturing without sacrificing her own needs. Henry, at 9, had channeled his boundless energy into productive avenues, becoming known throughout the community for his way with animals and his infectious enthusiasm. Emma, at 7, had overcome her fears, transforming into a sunny child secure in the knowledge that she was loved unconditionally. And Eliza and Jackson, watching their blended family flourish around baby Hope's cradle, had discovered that love wasn't always about thunderbolts and racing hearts. Sometimes it grew slowly, rooted in shared purpose and mutual respect, blossoming into something far stronger and more enduring than romantic fantasy. On the anniversary of their arrival, as autumn painted the Montana landscape in golds and crimsons, Jackson found Eliza on the porch swing, baby Hope sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. The setting sun bathed them in amber light, creating a picture of Madonna-like serenity that caught at his heart. "Penny for your thoughts," he said softly, settling beside her, his weight making the swing creak slightly. Eliza smiled, leaning into his solid warmth. "I was thinking about that day at the train station. How terrified I was that you'd send us away when you saw the children." "Best surprise of my life," Jackson replied, his arms circling her shoulders. "Though I admit, for a moment there I wondered what I'd gotten myself into." "And now?" He gazed out at the ranch, at William and Henry bringing in the horses for the night, at Charlotte gathering late vegetables from the garden with Emma's help, and then down at his sleeping daughter, perfect and precious in her mother's arms. "Now I know I got more than I ever deserved," he said simply. "A family, a purpose, a love I never thought I'd find again." Eliza turned her face up to his, her green eyes reflecting the same contentment she saw in his blue ones. "Not bad for a mail-order bride who brought 4 siblings in secret," she teased gently. "Not bad at all," Jackson agreed, bending to kiss her with the easy affection of a man secure in his happiness. "Though I'm still not convinced you didn't plan it all along, testing me right from the start to see if I was worthy." "If that was the test," Eliza said softly, "you passed with flying colors." Jackson read. As twilight deepened around them, the little family gathered on the porch of the home they had built together. Not just the physical structure, but the emotional foundation that sustained them all. The journey that had begun in desperation had led to something none of them could have anticipated. A love strong enough to encompass not just 2 hearts, but 7, bound together by choice rather than obligation. And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Eliza offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the man beside her, the gentle giant who had opened his home and his heart with those simple, life-changing words that had set their story in motion. The more the merrier. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.